Kiran. But Dear Peer is an online series which focuses on creativity and learning. It is hosted by the Creative Education Program at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology. We were very lucky that we were invited by Teacher Plus to curate their special issue in December 2024, which Amitabh and I took up to curate around the theme of learning by design. We were very interested in what design can do in learning experiences and what designers can do to create learning experiences. And there were two seminal documents that actually contour our curation. One is the design report, after which the first National Institute of Design was set up, and the other was the NEP 2020, which says and focuses on a designer mindset. And the struggle was, or what we were interested in, is to see how has that journey happened? What has happened in all these years between design formally being introduced in the country and now it coming to K-12? How are we thinking about it? So we thought of the issue in three parts. The first part looks at what is design. It introduces design and it starts with the Eames report. It says this is how we thought about it. Then we say actually design is everywhere, whether you look indoors and outdoors. And how do you mingle with that idea? In the second session, which is called Stakeholders and Systems, we were very lucky to have our contributors, which have joined us today for this session, which is Kriti Sood, Pawan Pagaria, and Kiran Bir Sethi. We will introduce them very shortly. But they are people who have created not only career, but organizations which bring design and learning together. So in this section, we ask them to reflect on their experiences. We ask them to look back and tell us why do they do what they do, how do they do it, and what drives them. And so this session today is about unpacking that. And we have all three people here. So we hope those who are here have had and have read some bits of what they put in the magazine. If not, we really encourage you to go back and have a look. With that, I'll just quickly introduce all our panelists, starting with Kiran Bir Sethi, who's a designer, educator, social entrepreneur. She has founded the Riverside School, but also Design for Change and now Riverside Learning Center with many, many other things. We are very lucky to have you here to discuss your book and also what you think about the design mindset and how it runs in the school. Then we have Kriti Sood, who's a curator and a researcher, also an educator and entrepreneur. She founded LAND, which is Learning Through Arts, Narratives, and Discourse. Kriti does small and big projects and talks about impact. She's not only a great manager, but there's so much to learn from her way of working with people and how to bring people together. So really looking forward to hear how Kriti moves between ecosystems, how she works with people, and what are the value systems that drive the work that she does. Among Kriti and Kiran, we also have Pawan. Pawan is a designer with many years of experience in the industry, and then took a wild turn, and came to academia to do his PhD at IIT Delhi in design and education. He's an entrepreneur of an organization which is currently being incubated at IIT Delhi as well, which looks at how can a designer and innovative mindset be built in a student. So he's really interested in learning. Common thing between all our speakers today is they focus on learning in not in different ecosystems, but also schools. They've all dipped in and out of schools, whether full time or part time or in some capacity or the other. Yeah, and with that, we open the floor. Amitabh, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit about ourselves as well, which really sets the platform for this conversation. I think so. We are one of the 11 programs at the undergraduate level at Srishti. It's a strange program in the sense that it's called creative education, and when you hear the name, your mind goes straight to the arts and education, and a simple search will tell you that these programs are not found in the undergraduate spaces typically globally. There are arts and education programs at the master's level, but why do we have a education centered program in Srishti at the undergraduate level is the first interesting bit. Then it's not an arts program actually; it's a design program. And why do we have an undergraduate education focused program which gives a design degree? Itself is quite an interesting idea, and I felt that we can unpackage these three ideas. I mean, these ideas by through a wonderful introduction that perhaps our speakers can give. And over to you, Kiran, in terms of you know I mean, it's a very smooth segue. when we talk about design and we talk about creativity in education, it's mostly sort of mistaken as a subject, specifically at the school level, almost the way arts is. And in came, I'm just building the context, which through when your practice started, or when you started Riverside, uh, to say that it's a school that's led by design and design thinking, and design has made the school and is not just a subject. How did I mean, and of course the four questions that your book also references, or the initial aspects of it, just the imagination of what is creativity in education, what is how do you look at that?
I don't think anybody, and I'm just taking from my time in school, I don't think creativity was ever discussed, right? It was not a vocabulary, not an action, not a concern at all. I think the idea of creativity was sort of, I sort of encountered it only when I came to NID. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, curiosity is the heart of creativity, right? And there is a difference between creativity and creation. These are all kind of sort of stories that come from first curiosity, and then there's interest, and then there's creativity, and then there's creation. So this is kind of, there's a journey into understanding creativity. And I remember thinking at NID just how profound that is as a way to look at the world. How do you build a worldview just by being curious? And curiosity is, I think, the starting point of then whatever you want to do with it. And I think creativity comes at later. And I don't think school education ever puts an effort into curiosity, right? Creativity is a much more later. So I think the emphasis, and they're so different from design. And I think I want to make that distinction. I don't think necessarily creativity is often design. So I think for me, curiosity was really the seed that helps everything else blossom. And planting that means it's supposed to be a very messy thing. I mean, you can't really put curiosity and then tell children don't be curious. So it's a dangerous thing to have, in a school where you want children to be curious, and then you don't give them the space or the time to harvest that curiosity. So it's so much easier to be compliant, to say, oh no, wo sab theek hai, that'll be in your after school programs or whatever, but right now you just listen and be obedient and do what I'm saying. So to foster or to nurture creativity is a brave decision to take, and I think education for the longest time didn't want to get into that space because it meant it'll take you away from what your set destination is. That means marks and a grade and an exam. And creativity or curiosity will take you away from it, and it'll take you to destinations and directions that you're not entirely sure how to manage. I think we're getting better with it now. I think schools are definitely far more open to this idea of the messiness of learning, and that it's not going to be clean. But it really takes an act of bravery and courage to be able to keep that at the center of your program. So I would say it's curiosity more than creativity, because that creativity would come later, and just nurturing that is a great starting point.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I mean, does that resonate with the work that you do with land, Kriti, in a way that I mean, a lot of it, I mean, I'm sure the messiness resonates with all of us. But when you are reimagining the classroom, or when you are bringing in the arts or the artists, in not just as a subject component, but also as a way that you engage with both the artists and education institutes. How would you define this within the work that you do?
So
Like, firstly, I feel, anybody who's running a school, I have so much respect for those people because it is so damn hard. For me, land is a pedagogical research lab. So it's my practice. Like, pedagogy and intersection of creative practices is something which I'm really deep diving into in a very nomadic manner. So it's not like I'm like settled in a place, but I'm learning and engaging in these intersections. I believe that there's a lot of words which have been put forward, and the nuances of it or the true communicative language of it is missing, right? Very, very often, even if we take the word art within the systems of learning, it's become very skill based as opposed to being very sensitive based. And art as a language, it is perceptive than cognitive in many, many ways. So if you look at that, so, just because it's been bracketed in a formula that, okay, it is the arts, so that means, we might study it in a very skillful manner. We might learn about few artists' works. We might learn about just their practice and everything. And sadly, in India, you'll have 5 or 6 white male artists who you're learning about from eternity, or like, how you're also learning about the folk and tribal in completely wrong language of communication in so many ways. So what really happens is I feel more than what it is, the terminologies and everything, I feel the essence of learning truly becomes, can we nurture spaces which can actually create some sort of diverse way of nurturing each individual. And when you do that, that can enable anybody's, whatever the terminology of creativity itself is, into a very unique space. Now, if I'm working with an artist or with a learner or with a community or a context, it becomes very important for me. Like, if you're also studying the whole NID report, which you did, right? And when you just studied about the LOTA, I mean, it is pretty much in every household that we see. But do we see it as a creative impulse of learning through it? Or do we just see it as an object? Do we see the stories behind it? Do we look at the craftsman as something which is deep diving into knowledge systems, which can become wisdom applications or not? Or are we just looking at it as a skill of making some sort of a pottery, right? So there is like lots of different ways of doing this together. I think what is really messy for me right now is that how simplified every word has become, and we have not like really let into like what are the deeper engagements which come into being. So when I'm working with the artists, which I've been doing for almost 13 years as a curator around the subcontinent where my practice is, one understands if somebody like, which I'd shared even in my article, like somebody like Ravi Agarwal, who is an environmentalist, a photographer, writer, in many, many ways. And when he's doing inquiry around Yamuna, one way of looking at it is that he's just taken certain photographs, right? But when you deep dive into his research books and look into the ecology, look into the environment, and then we start looking into how he's speaking about regeneration as composed to sustainability, and what is the role of the arts and that element of it. So I think because it is so transcontextual and so many layers to it, so when we make it so simplified, I feel we take away something from it. So right now, what is like really, I feel very confused about the systems is that the teaching happens, but I don't know where does the learning begin. And we're very, very much into just putting words and thoughts in a very linear manner. But if it has to be approached in a creative manner, then it has to be, your right brain has to be functional. It has to be going round and round till we find some thought or solution, or I don't know what. But in a simplified manner, also like design, like it's a very simple definition, which, like, for me right now, it could become like concept and function as a very simple thing with a lot of empathy and sensitivity. Whereas art, it is form and concept with a lot of empathy and sensitivity. So, what happens when you merge the two? What happens to these vocabularies? And I think that becomes a learning system in its own. So, I think what is messy is the opposition of what defines learning and how do we nurture that? And then how do we bring out all these words to it?
I think very beautifully put, Priti. And I think the messiness of language, I think, is really a good point because I think when Amitabh and I were working on the issue, it kept coming up. Not once, not in the first section or the second section, because every time we would get into a conversation, even we were questioning ourselves: Are we talking about just design, or are we talking about design in education? What is it? Where do we draw the line? And I also think it makes it a very good point for Pawan to come in now, because Pawan actually raises this in his issue where he speaks about not just what design may mean in different schools within India itself. Forget across time or across different geographies, but also what design learning means. Where is it situated in terms of other subjects? And does it sit in isolation or does it sit integrated, or what does it mean? So over to you, Pawan.
Yeah, thanks, Siddhi. So what Kiran pointed out, actually, I wanted to just connect the dots in the way that I was trained as an engineer and I joined engineering college so that I can make something. But at the end, I didn't make anything. So I thought ki where I can make anything. And accidentally, I got to know about design. And even I didn't know about NID. I gave entrance examination of design and I went to IIT and joined a company where I was designing cars. And I thought that is design. And when I came out of that shallow aspect of design, I'm actually understanding design much more better in the last 5 years. So coming back to your point, like where design, learning, education, school begins. So my point is we have to start really early. And once we were looking at the ecosystem, then we came to know about what Kiran is doing at Riverside School. That felt really great that somebody is doing something at least. uh, so we are also on that mission, like how can we impart that education from the very beginning. So coming back to schools, schools say if we don't start really early, what happens? What my experience and coming close to academics also let me understand design from a very multifaceted approach. I now feel I was not doing design at all in designing cars. I was doing something else. So you go to a deeper level of design and then you understand the subject and then you differentiate much more between design and art, and then you go back to school and try to interact with students and try to interact with and try to teach some concepts of design. So one thing what I have observed in schools, but it will be very, I think, very early to generalize it. They have a very strong attachment with drawing as a subject with design. They feel if I can draw, I can design. So whenever, they have such a strong mental model is being cultivated in a child's mind, that this is drawing is design and what it looks like and feels like it's only design. The problem solving aspect nobody talks about, and in our schools nobody understands also. So that's what as a team, me and Anupam, we are trying to solve it. Like how can we solve this problem where our children understand the concept of design. Uh, Let us for drop the word design also. Like as I'm a student of Professor Das, he says that let us not be a salesman of design. Let us see how can we cultivate the essence of creative thinking in each subject they learn. If we can do that, we will be able to solve the problem. Otherwise, what we will be doing, we will again create one more silo which will again stand against mathematics, history, and all. And we will again create one compartment fighting with all those subjects, see, and bearing the flag of design. That design should be taught. It should not be like that. That's what we are trying to do. But somewhere we need to start, and schools are a better place. And some now we feel that we should start from kindergarten, not schools, and we should start with parents also. So can we do that? And once we start from the very beginning, then we can. I feel we can germinate the seeds of creative thinking, uh, appreciation for arts, appreciation for colors and everything, observation, problem solving, empathy, everything comes when you inculcate these concepts from the very beginning. But when you inculcate these concepts at a later stage, it's very difficult to break the mental models. And I have seen students telling me, "मेरे को तो CA बनना है." In class they say that they are so hardwired that I want to be a chartered accountant. Why this subject is important for me? So they don't also appreciate it. So they become so hardwired, so closed-ended. So then it's very difficult to break the shell. So my take is we should start early, start as early as possible, and let us uh, try to be much more collaborative in nature, where we can say, okay, hey, look, this is also one way of thinking, and what if we do something like this, and let us see, does it have an impact on other subjects as well, what you are doing. So that's how I think we need to approach it, and that's how we are trying to build it. And I always wanted to meet Kiran Bir Sethi, and I didn't know that we will meet online in such a format. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that's our lookout as well. No, so our Siddhi, me were part of a team that were running the visual arts program for the Delhi government project, and like for me personally, I got into education through practice, and then from higher education at Shishti, and Shishti is a we understood a lot more about Shishti than we understood about school education once we stepped out of that comfort zone, because we realized that we were literally monks in a monastery, where we were in a design affirmative ecosystem where certain ideas are not even challenged, even relevancies aren't really challenged. And then we entered our schools, and we realized that we are one of the subjects. Uh, didn't know what hit us, because suddenly it places creativity and what we understand as a equitable, convivial form of living into question. And uh, and after that we learned about Riverside, and we were like, okay, what is, like, in the sense, because we were again pigeonholed as a subject. And for us, our learning was that no, this is something wrong is happening here. We didn't know the proof of, like, how to say, okay, you know what, look at this. I wish we had known about Riverside earlier. But it was understanding the work that you do in the school, Kiran, looking at education across all subjects, all levels, and having powerful moments. I remember this one instance in your book where you were talking about how you got the school timings for learners changed, and the conversation that you were facilitating wasn't one between the learners and the teachers. It was with the parents. And so much of it touches, raw nerves, in terms of these are all very sensitive, sort of touch points in how we imagine an institution. So how does a design-led institution, catering to, like, a broader perspective of the world, where someone from your school can become a dentist or a chartered accountant, or what is then how is then how do you then define this?
Yeah, I think it has to be the operating model. It is not a subject. It is not a activity. It is not a good thing to have. It's an operating model, if that's an analogy one can make. So the idea of, at the basis level, the operating model is co-creation. It is inviting the user into the conversation and solution, right? That is where most schools struggle the most. Forget everything else that you want to add into that layer. At its heart is the invitation. It is not the imposition. It is the invitation. And that act of inviting the user, and the user could be a parent, it could be the student, it could be the support staff, it could be whatever it is, into the solution discovery. That is where the general pushback to something like that is, where's the time? Of who has a time? Let us just make it happen. Let us solve. And therein lies this lack of agency in what happens in school systems. So I think for me, when I started the Riverside School in 2001, the idea that, luckily, since I didn't come from education, I was not bound by any rules, and I didn't even know which ones I was breaking. So I was having a fun time. And my youngest students were 5. Okay, the youngest, which I started, was grade 1, so they were all of 5 years old. And because my education was in design, that was the only thing that I could bring back into developing or designing Riverside. So it was so intuitive and so natural to do the co-creation. Even from naming the school, we didn't name it. It was named by the kids. It was designed in terms of just recognizing what the name, etc. All of that. But more importantly, the curiosity was what drove the design. The fact that I didn't know education and I had to learn not from the masters but from the students. And I think therein was my deepest and most powerful insights. What was a 5-year-old telling me that nobody else could tell me, and that curiosity, because I became their teacher for the first, I taught for the first 10 years, and I took those children up every single year because it was just that. It was just a profound curiosity, a profound interest in understanding how children made sense and what was time for them and what was engagement. And only through that was the understanding. So in many ways, design became the operating model. It was not a subject, not a topic, not this thing. And so as we got more and more clearer about how that operating model was just the go-to. And I think the fidelity to the process was what served us hugely. When in doubt, go back to the user. So the act of that changing the time was not because we wanted to be different or let's be cool. None of that. None of those were the motivations for any of the solutions that came out. It was always driven by deep curiosity and empathy for the user and with the user. So the idea of the time changing was only because of adolescence. When our first adolescent batch sort of started school, it was so clear that the science said that the melatonin comes in 2 hours later. So they will sleep later, and therefore it was not lifestyle that changed them waking up later. It was literally biology. And nobody was listening to the science. And obviously it meant that if they were waking up earlier, that first 3 hours were completely useless for the learner. Yet the default is, hey, but all schools are working, starting till 7:30. What is the problem? So for me, knowing the science was not good enough. It was the children who actually did a deep amount of study about the science, the circadian rhythm that changes. So it was back to the user. And they, in fact, became the proponents for this with the parents. So when the science is strong, when the research is strong, when the solution makes a lot of sense, you get deep courage from that. And I think that is what children start learning. There's a deep amount of courage and strength in a solution that emerges from deep empathy. And I think when the operating model keeps going back to the user, it is fabulous. So I think everything about Riverside was born out of that, right? And it just becomes now 25 years of doing it. It is now the default operating model. So whatever it is, we will go back to the user. We will have fidelity to the process. And so it's at no point trying to be different or cute or just for the sake of it. And that means that now the children use it as part of their we don't call it problem solving so much as opportunity, finding. So it really becomes an opportunity for them to keep going back to that as well. So I think it just became so important. It was not art and craft. It was not a design class. It was the mindset. And so that is what we got to see over the years. Yeah. 25 years. Oh my God.
Oh my God, 25
Yeah.
years.
Seriously.
It must have been quite a
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Yeah.
Has the
And-
time changed again, Kiran? I mean, I've been curious since I've read it that have you had to change the time again, or have students come back
No,
to
not at
approach the process?
all. In fact, we find that the stress levels are down, their well-being is higher. And now, of course, WHO and everybody's waking up. Yeah. All, adolescents must start school later. But nobody wants to do that. Again, keep saying courage. Design also requires courage to really have fidelity to the user, right? And make that shape the solution. Therein most we fall short of, and we say, no, let's be convenient, let's be popular. And those motivations don't serve well for the solution.
Actually, Kiran had started giving this response by evoking the word co-creation. And I felt where a user and a facilitator, you know, or the facilitator and the learner, it's not about the, but the relationship becomes of one of co-creating. And Kriti mentions this in her work, where co-creation, it's not just between, I think, people, but also arts and learning and arts. So, Kriti, do you want to pull up that thread again and link it to what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I just want to say I really resonated with what Kiran said about the design mindset and not because I just feel like even when I think about the arts, it's the arts mindset other than it being any other thing, right? And so that was something which really did resonate with me, as because I think we just have to talk about it as a larger context of so many things. Um, for me, there's like I feel like whenever an artist or a learner comes together, or an educator, facilitator, and everything, the true learning of it happens at the periphery somewhere, right? Like in so many ways, like, you know, when the arts was designed as something which is extracurricular in your classrooms, or now alternative, or whatever terminology you want to call it, but there was some sort of this free thought, freedom, ideas, exploration, which were coming about, which was enabling very self-organized learning happen. So even if you look at like MSU, for instance, like, you know, the addas become such an area where everybody sits down, have their chai, talk about everything around the world. And so that little moment of sharing, a dialogue becoming a discourse, is so, so essential. And I think that happens when there is no hierarchy within each other. So for me, like, if I'm running a fellowship in Jodhpur, in the wall city area, and I'm bringing in artists, fellows, learners, researchers, and everything else, it really becomes about an ever shifting collective where everybody can have their conversation, can learn from each other, and actually co create in that aspect. Now, this is something which is not new. Okay. Like in Jodhpur itself, Hatai, it's a very old tradition which has been happening when the whole world sleeps, the whole city comes back to have conversations around Hatai, and everybody's speaking about everything around the sun. Like, you know, in Hatai, you're speaking about the politics, the gender, the sex, the art, the craft, the culture, everything. So nothing has ever been away from it. And when you look at the arts itself, in 3rd century AD, it was spoken really beautifully, like, you know, without poetry, there can be no theater. Without theater, there can be no dance. Without dance, there can be no art, visual arts. Without visual arts, there can be, like, you know, music. So there's everything is interconnected in so many ways. So when the crux of it is so co-creational, so how do we actually segregate it? Becomes a very disturbing question in somewhere, because why are you putting it in silos? So even if your role as an artist or educator, facilitator, learner itself, but when you come into a system, I feel we all are learners. So when Kiran was saying that she actually goes back to the learners as a user, and she did not learn from the masters, but from the students somewhere. So it really becomes that you're co-learning with that. And then you exemplify with the model that you create in some way, because it is co-creational. In the same way, like, and this has happened in the arts many, many times. I mean, Amitabh and I have done a project together where we actually co-learned for like 6 months together. And, you know, even in Jodhpur, when we were actually doing these projects, and I asked like Pradeep Krishnan to come in, then I asked, like, you have Madan Meena, who's also written for you, fabulous article. And then there are people within the local community, there's intergenerational learning happen, and everybody's just inquiring about the water and the step wells, you know. And then how do you actually look into the museums of it? How do you actually look into the grass? How do you actually look into the miniatures? And when all that happens, that means the whole system is coming together with some sort of a knowledge which they hold dear to themselves and co-create in some sort of a learning engagement happening. So I think the when we think about co-creation, firstly, we have to stop thinking about hierarchies, because it's not going to be functional with hierarchies, whether it's age or whether it's knowledge or whether it is confidence or whatever it is, right? Everybody is different in many, many ways. And I think the other aspect of co-creation is that there might not be the correct answer where we will reach to. So we just have to be okay with the vulnerability of those moments, vulnerability of those failures, vulnerability of everything that it brings to it. Because many times when we think that we have to co-create and collaborate, something really big and correct has to come out of it. But many times it doesn't. And that's how it is a functional thing, because you continuously learn and learn and learn. So fundamentally, like what the arts have taught us in many, many ways is that it is just an exploration of so many thoughts in a collective manner. And let's flow with that in some way. And the flow can take you somewhere, but we might not have a very concrete answer to it right now. So I think when we speak about these thoughts and ideas and everything, and that's what we try to do at Land also, is like when we, if within our think tank, we try to bring in so many people as researchers, thought gatherers, everything else. We try to study exhibitions. We try to put those together and put them into learning systems and everything. And what happens with that is like actually everybody has the same weightage in the conversation. And then there is a dialogue which gets formed. Otherwise, a dialogue has already been formed. It's coming to you in certain way. You're listening to it as a passive listener with already thinking about what the answer should be. There is no active listening to it. You're not co-creating. You are just actually being a bit of a submissive player within the system. And then you feel that that has happened. So I think those are certain elements which I'm learning right now. But yeah.
We always say that with the advent of AI, the first systems that will be taken over by machines will be the obedient ones.
It's true.
In terms of I mean, I myself, I'm very confused about obedience and the form of, I mean, fear that also controls a lot of learning, fear of missing out, fear of like finishing school, otherwise fear of not getting into a good college, finishing college because of fear of not getting a good job, and then of course, does the promise of education fail you? The fear of that failure itself sometimes really binds us to older ideas. In your article, you had said, uh, and I'm talking to Mr. Pagaria, sir. You had said something very interesting. You had said as we move from the industrial economy, and you had located the evolution of the modern education system as a post-industrial revolution idea. You said that when as we move from the industrial economy to information economy and head towards the imagination economy, you are also sort of indicating a certain shifting of the flow and imaginations of the world around. How would you look at the way of look at design or design-led education? What is its role with these shifting tides? Are we chasing it? Are we shaping it? Are we like what's the reality and what's the dream?
Yes, so Amitabh, like what we were discussing about co-creation, I want to build upon that. Co-creation is such an integral part of design as well. Co-creation, collaboration, and this also leads to one more word, which is fear. And when we say fear, the fear of failure, we never taught our children how to celebrate failure. That's what your conversation just few seconds back we were talking about fear of not getting a good job, fear of this does the education system failed us. So that aspect of design, when we say that fail fast or fail early, or why we demean failure so much, can we celebrate failure? Can we teach students from the very uh, early stage that this is the part of the process? Even if you fail, that's okay. Let's again build up and let's again learn from it. But then I saw a small video where he was saying it's not failure, it's learning. Why don't we rephrase it also? That was my learning, and then we move ahead. And so when we are moving ahead in time, so we can't say that okay, systems were such during industrial revolution, and we need to have similar kind of education in current times. When you see the advent of AI models, which are really, really becoming imaginative and creative at the same time. So how we can be much more adherent to our unique abilities as humans, which is when we talk about creative thinking or creativity. So this is what I wanted to highlight when I say something, that when we are moving in the imagination age, this will be something which we need to be much more loyal about, and we need to trust it much more, and we need to develop it much more. Even though it might sound be misfit in many scenarios, but still we need to adhere to those intrinsic abilities of us being human. So how can we develop that, and how this will only help us to thrive in the world which we are heading towards. And there, the aspect of design which talks about everything, and which talks about collaboration, which talks about failure, which talks about co-creating, which talks about understanding the user really well, plays a major role in shaping our children's mind. That was the context when I was talking about, like, how can we take the aspect or learnings from design education, and how can we navigate in the so turbulent future, or so fast rapidly changing future, where we can design help us in giving those insights. So that was the context, and that's where I think we need to be open to change, and we need to try to take steps which helps us in building such resilience among our children. And yeah, but one more thing which I want to put here is, it's really difficult when we say that we will change everything at once, and even at policy level, and NEP looks really, really great. But when you go to schools, you feel that how the difference between policymakers and the difference between people who will be implementing the policy, and then there is a huge difference. Who is going to bridge the gap, and how we can help even the policymakers to bridge the gap. Because the policy at its level, it's really beautiful, it's really articulated really well, but how we will do it at school level. So these are the challenges when again I think we need to apply what are the aspects of design, aspects of problem solving, so that we can help our coming generation and equip them really well, so that they don't feel that okay, suddenly everything has changed, and suddenly the job scenarios have changed. How so that will give them the confidence to navigate in that changing world. That's my take is.
I was just looking at the time, and I mean, if anybody from our audience wants to ask any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll take them up. And I'm going to hijack a little bit to ask a question that I have for all for the panelists, is to say that we have a designer, and all of you are creative practitioners, but find yourself working in learning and education today. And many of the people who are listening in today are either design aspirants or art aspirants, or are already in a design institution. And just wanted to speak about, what do you think their role can be in facilitating this learning, whether we have looked at opportunity finding or problem solving, or how do we define what they can do, or how do we paint a picture for them to see a role that they can play in learning in a future that we've just spoken about is turbulent, is uncertain. So yeah, I just want you all as creative practitioners, just tell us what you think are possible roles for these young people. We'll start with Kriti since her mic is unmuted.
One second, I just want to get this clear. When you say possible roles and everything, you mean career-wise or just human-wise?
I meant career-wise, but if you want to respond to human-wise, I think why not? I meant career-wise, because I mean, if as creative education, the creative education team at Srishti, I think we are our cohorts are creative educators. They're interested in learning, they're interested in creativity. And so we want to know from you, because we speak about it very passionately in our classroom, in our school, and to say that you have a role to play. So just wanted to hear from you, what role do you think creative practitioners can play in learning professionally in the future?
I think firstly, because I also studied art history as my master's, right? And then I got into curation. And I feel any creative practitioner, firstly, they have to have a unique sense of their own practice, which will be important in building those bridges. Whether you're in curation, whether you're in research or into education and everything, understanding it more from the lens of a very symbiotic relation than a transactional space will be important because and I can just highlight the areas I work in, and I'm sure Pawan and Kiran can will be better within the other systems for sure. But if you look at the museum spaces, or you look at contemporary art, or you look at knowledge systems which are getting built from there, I think there is a great intersection, and it is a great space to be right now because within the foundations or collections or any art institutions and everything, there is a larger voice right now that how do we bridge these gaps where learning and the arts come together. Otherwise it has been actually put into two different silos together. So how do you like merge yourself into even being a somebody who's into museology, curation, conservation, artist, writer, researcher, and everything else? And how do you play a role of a educator and a practitioner and a facilitator into learning systems? Because many education institutions which we tie up with are also questioning the role of a teacher, right? And with the changing system, the role of an educator has to be redefined. Like, who all are going to be there, who all can bring in certain amount of learnings which can be valuable into systems and everything. So I think career-wise, this is an aspect that I can say is like, please really define your practice. And just because you're a curator or an educator doesn't mean it's going to be one-way street, right? It has to have a very authentic voice to your practice. And as a human, I would just say that nobody can really tell you what the future is, but the hope is that you take the engagement again in a very, very symbiotic manner, not transactional, because the truth of it is like, and even if you're in a school or as a curator or anything, life happens in so many ways. And how can you be just deprived of yourself into one little thing that this is the only route? Because life is going to throw multiple things onto you. And I think if you're not going to be taking every aspect of life and putting career just at one aspect and not putting life as a merging point, then the collapses are going to happen. And then what the fear of failure, which we approach as not as something as learning, but just as a collapse, that is what we see in many ways. So I hope we all see a career not as a silo, even in life, but something very symbiotic, which comes out of life and be very wise about it in some ways. So yes.
Yeah, I think it just resonates so deeply with us at Shishti more so, where I feel we are of the opinion that our learners will make the path that they'll take in a way that perhaps what they want to do cannot be defined in a role that is immediately industry serving, but our hope is that they would be able to they would be able to shape an aspect of even a sustainable future for themselves that they are seeking. They can do that. And it's really funny that both with Riverside and Shishti, in that sense, it's 20 odd years that we've been in existence. And I think for us to be able to see our first learners be part of our current batch of educators or facilitators, or our learners becoming our mentors for a fresh batch of student, that cycle has been quite interesting for us to see. How does that shape for you, Kiran, in terms of knowing that the learner that has been coming out of your vision and your relationship with the world goes back to the world in a in a very diverse capacity. And then, I mean, how you must have seen that shifting, you must have seen that changing in as much as you must be now creating learners and educators at the same time. And for the time to come, what are these? Who are these? Who are these designers? Who are these thinkers? What does the world need more of, basically?
Well, I think the world needs a lot of love. I keep coming back to that as a big dose, and I keep saying increase the dose again and again and again. But having said this, I'm going to respond in just terms of the say children going out from Riverside and having had this experience for 15 years. What does it mean? So a lot of our interesting insights from alumni have been to see the way they've used this mindset in the work they've been doing, whether as entrepreneurs, whether as the work they've done, and whether it's further education, whether as husbands, wives, all of that. It's shaping very beautifully to keep getting these stories back and to see that we've served them well to be in an uncertain world. And I think that has never, ever bothered them. And I think that's been the really great learning, that they've walked out there with a solid sense of who they are, with a very clear ability to say no, which is a really big thing that even design needs and designers need. Otherwise, we're constantly pandering to all the trends. But I think more importantly, in now when they're into the workspace, because a lot of them now are worker and they're entrepreneurs and they're starting their own companies, etc. So many of them tell us that they're using the same principles. They're guided by empathy. They're guided by co-creation. They're using those same, learnings in setting up their own workspaces and building culture above everything else. And even in their relationships that they share with people, it keeps coming back to that idea of listening and the idea of empathy. So it's really lovely to hear these stories coming back. And more importantly, in the first couple of batches who've now got into work, 60% are entrepreneurs. Now that's a fabulous, strength that they've got, that they've taken a passion and they've been able to make it a profession and have that strength, whether it is an NGO, whether it is in the industry, whether it is starting sustainable stuff, but all of them have been guided by values, not by profit. And I think that has been a big, real beautiful learning. So I think when you build these strong cultures, and I think you have cultures that are shaped by values, eventually those seeds will sprout. Or you can keep doing it in those 15 years that they're with you, is just constantly nurturing those seeds to see that somewhere some seed is going to kind of take shape. So for us, that's been really lovely. But at the heart of it, it is deep and unrelenting love. And we don't talk about that enough. We talk about all the intellectualizing, but we don't talk about just love and noticing it and telling it and telling them, I love you. I may not like you many times, but I love you. And having children hear that and having the team hear that and it's a very powerful recognition of who we are as a species. I think that's been wonderful.
I don't know if we have enough time, but we have a question for you, Kiran, as well in the chat, where, I'm just reading the last bit, which is to say, how did you handle personally while building the foundation in your school? How did you handle creative blocks or failures?
I have to say, I'm not a fan of the word failure anyway. Never been. I don't think that's a word I understand at all, simply because the fact it assumes that there has been an end and therefore you can't do anything about it. And I don't think that has ever been a construct. It really is about, and I think as designers, we understand the idea of iteration and prototyping really well. And if you really do that well, you always are in a feedback loop, and it's only up to you to decide whether you want to use that information or not to change the iteration and to understand it better. So there's no failures, choices you make. It's just choices. Now you don't choose to do it, hell, up to you. You choose it, great, right? So I don't think that has been the. So we've always been super agile about it, really been agile, and I think that has really served us well. We've never really had to think through too much and then roll it out and say, oh, abhi nahi kaam kiya. You'll never have that space if you're always in with the user. You'll never come to a space to say, ye nahi chala. Not everybody might like it, and that's perfectly okay. but everybody must have a say in the ownership of the idea and the solution, right? And that doesn't always have to be a popular one at all. So once you're really sensitive and context sensitive and user facing and involved, we've never had failure. We've just had context, and the context might change, and you will iterate again. So if you're agile and nimble over the years, hell, my God, 25 years, all the, we're still iterative. But because we'll always start by saying, is it still in service of the user? If it's not, it doesn't have a space and place, right? So it's been a wonderful journey of being, having a bias towards action, bias towards iteration, and really being sensitive with that. So yeah, we're totally cool. Many things have not worked, but it's not failure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Siddhi?
No, I
How-
hope that answers Kavya's question. But yes, Amitabh, I didn't hear what did you say after Siddhi?
Oh, no. I was just saying, I think it's about time. We had a lot more that we want to talk to you about. We also wanted to share with you a little bit what we had done at the Delhi Government Project, yada, yada, yada. But I think we are trying to keep it to time, because I think everybody's been very, very generous with their time. But so before we end, I think to all our three speakers, thank you so much for your generosity. Thank you so much for your ideas. It moves us, it moves our learners. And just if you'd like to leave one lasting thought with our students, with our learning group before we leave, and we are part of it. I think we learn the most inside a classroom at Srishti. Any last words before we end this wonderful session?
I want to end with the thing that we should not be in a hurry, because we are on a very, very long journey, and this life is not even a bit of it. So let us not worry. Let us do whatever we can. बहुत जन्म है अभी.
जब तक
Thanks.
That's what my take is.
Kriti?
Good to see
Done? Yeah.
I mean, I would just say that operate from a space of pause and care for yourself. It's very important, not to forget.
Well, I don't know. At this point, I think I'm more and more driven by being in the present. And I think that's been very useful. And I keep telling myself that today, show up, be present, love, have joy. It's a good life.
I
Wonderful.
think we've come full circle, right? We started on this note. Show
Yeah.
up. Yeah, that's a good way to end this, I think. And as
Yeah.
a reminder, I think we're doing this again with our last section of the magazine with Sandeep Rai and Madan Meena on 7th March at the same time, 6 p.m. So do join in to hear their perspective on learning by design.
Yeah, where we discuss the NEP more. But thank you so much. I'm going to stop.
Hi, Pawan, if you are, please come in to Riverside and we'll have a coffee with Kiran.